It's very cold, but I hope you are all keeping warm and healthy and are ready to talk through assignment 2 with me. So assignment two's focus is on short stories. The due date is on the 23rd of June, and the short story focus is Man Lands on the Moon by Sindiwe Magona. So much like assignment 1, this assignment is broken up into 2 compulsory sections. So section A is on the short story, and section B is more specific. It's also on a short story, but it's on Man Lands on the Moon. So section A is more about your experience of the module, and it allows you to demonstrate your understanding of some of the terminology that we've been going through and characteristics of short stories and so on. So what I plan to do in this video is to talk you through assignment 2 and just give you some general advice. So I'm not going to be answering the questions for you. I may in fact refer to another short story, I Will Not Apologize, by Mare Fisher, that we've gone through during our tutorials, just to demonstrate some things for you. Okay, so let's start. Section A is based on Unit 3, so you're told that you should read and work through Unit 3, which is on the short story in the study guide, and thereafter address the following questions in short paragraphs of 100 to 200 words. So paragraphs are at least 4 sentences long. They can definitely be more than that, but they should not be fewer than 4 sentences. And remember, you should try to reach a word count of between 100 and 200 words. So the first question asks, which 3 characteristics that can be used to distinguish a short story from a novel are the most helpful to you? And discuss these in a short paragraph, exploring what they are and how they are useful to you. So I'd like to draw your attention to 3 characteristics, and distinguish, and short story, and novel. So I'm highlighting these things because they will help you to answer the question appropriately. Okay, and this is definitely a good practice that you should also use when you are going through assignments or examinations. So to highlight, underline, circle, whatever you need to do, any words or phrases that guide you in your answering of the question. So these sort of become like little check boxes that you can mark as you complete your answer to the question. So the first thing is 3 characteristics. So 3, not 2, not 4, and that can be used to distinguish a short story from a novel. So this is something we've dealt with quite extensively during our tutorials. So I think this should be fairly simple to do. But again, go through Unit 3 if you're unsure of anything. The word distinguish, if you don't know what that means, definitely look that up in a dictionary for yourself and answer the question in a short paragraph. That's what you're told to do, exploring what they are and how they are useful to you. So what they are means you've got to explain what they mean or define these 3 characteristics, and how they are useful to you. So why are they useful to you when you read a short story versus reading a novel? Question 2, after studying Unit 3, how are you able to differentiate between first, second, and third person narration? So again, Unit 3 as mentioned there, so definitely go through it, and you're asked to differentiate between first, second, and third person narration. So again, something we've gone through extensively in our tutorials, and you basically need to indicate that you understand the difference between these 3 types of narrators. Okay. And so you've got to explain the difference between the 3 and how you differentiate between them. Then question 3, in your opinion, which 3 plot elements drive short stories? Justify your choice in a brief discussion. So very nice to talk about your opinion on something. Which 3 plot elements? So if you can't remember what plot elements are, go back through our tutorials, go through Unit 3 again, and these 3 elements, so 3, not 2, not 4, they need to drive short stories. So what gives a short story momentum? What helps a short story progress? And then you are asked to justify your choice in a brief discussion. So if you don't know what justify means, you can look it up in a dictionary. In fact, I think I'll just quickly demonstrate that to you now. So I say look it up in a dictionary. I don't say Google it, and I say that for good reason, because you may have noticed that when you Google things these days, you get an AI summary that no one asked for. And it is helpful to an extent, but the summary is based on the most popular hits or search results, and these results are not always the most accurate. So I would say go straight to the dictionary. If you have an actual hard copy of a dictionary, that's wonderful. You should definitely make use of it. If not, go online. You might have access to the OED, Oxford English Dictionary, via your UNISA institution access. If not, you can use something like Merriam-Webster, which I'm going to demonstrate to you now. So here we have the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and I want to look up the word justify, for example. So I type the word justify in the search bar, click the magnifying glass or hit enter, and then just wait for a moment for this definition to pop up, hopefully. Seems like the internet needs some time to think, but don't we all? Okay, so justify is a verb, and we're not going to go into too much detail, but basically, definition one, to prove or show to be just, right, or reasonable. So basically, to demonstrate why you are correct in what you are saying or what you are arguing. All right, so section A's total is for 15 marks, so let that guide you in your answering of these questions. And remember, also 100 to 200 words per paragraph. So each of these answers should be a paragraph of between 100 and 200 words. Right, so we move to section B, also compulsory, Man Lands on the Moon by Sindhuwe Magona. If you haven't read the short story, you definitely should. It's a requirement to answer this section, so you can find it as an e-reserve on the library website and work through it in conjunction with Unit 3 and Tutorial Letter 501. So this will give you some reading strategies that you can employ when you read the short story. And again, remember to use a dictionary to look up the definitions of any unfamiliar words in the short story and the assignment questions. You're given some very useful guidelines. So these guidelines will help you to write full answers that definitely check all the boxes as you're going through. So as I said before, when it comes to answering questions, just underline, circle, highlight, whatever you have to do, the sort of flags that tell you what you need in order to provide a sufficient answer to a question. So here, the extra guidance you're given is to write your answers as a paragraph between 10 and 15 lines. Begin with a topic sentence that reflects the main topic of the paragraph. Discuss the topic by quoting evidence from the short story. These quotations should be incorporated into grammatically complete and coherent sentences. Explain how each of your quotations supports your argument. Employ correct referencing techniques and make use of appropriate academic conventions. End with a sentence which summarizes and reflects on the significance of what you have argued. And refer to Tutorial Letter 501 for a reminder of topic sentences, paragraphing, argumentation, and incorporating of quotations. So I think here I would just like to very quickly give you a sort of trick that I use when it comes to writing paragraphs. So I always refer to the Peel method of formulating a paragraph, and I'll go through that with you now. So Peel, P-E-E-L. So the P stands for point, and I'm just going to type that here. You can see point. And so the point of the paragraph is contained in the topic sentence. So that's the first sentence of the paragraph usually, and it lets you know what the paragraph is going to be dealing with. So if I were to write a paragraph about topic sentences, my first sentence might be something like, topic sentences are usually the first sentence of a paragraph. Full stop. There's my topic sentence. I've let the reader know that the focus is on topic sentences, and I've sort of argued already that they are the first sentence of the paragraph. So based on my topic sentence, the reader will then think, aha, okay, so this paragraph is going to be dealing with topic sentences. Okay, so very useful, and definitely use them in your own paragraphs. Then the second part of the Peel method is evidence. E for evidence, the first E. So as it says here, discuss the topic by quoting evidence from the short story. So quoting, that's when you use inverted commas, you're taking text directly from the short story, but it's got to be part of a coherent sentence and a grammatically complete sentence. So you can't just add a quote to a paragraph and leave it there like that. It has to be part of a sentence. You have to engage with the quote as part of the sentence. It cannot stand alone. Okay, so I'll demonstrate that for you just now. Another way you could do this is by paraphrasing from the short story. So taking a section that's relevant to the question you're answering and putting it in your own words. Whether you are paraphrasing or quoting, you are still required to include in-text references. So to show exactly where you got the information from in the short story, whether you are putting it into your own words or not. Okay, but again, I will demonstrate this just now. Then the second E in the Peel method stands for explain, and you can see that right here, explain how each of your quotations supports your argument. So this is also why it's useful to engage with a quote in the same sentence. So don't let a quote stand by itself. Engage with it, introduce it, and then as part of the same sentence, if you have the space, or else the next sentence, explain the quotation. How does it support your argument? How is it relevant to the topic sentence? Okay, and I will demonstrate that for you just now. And then the L in the Peel method stands for link. And I'm just going to put a chair in between these two bullet points because they both kind of link to the idea of linking. So linking means bringing everything together. So showing or providing a summary, as this bullet point says. So how does the evidence link to the point that you've made? How does your explanation link to the evidence? How does all of this link to the topic sentence or the point of your paragraph? So as it says here, you've got to make sure you've got correct referencing. That's important in linking information back to the short story that you're analyzing, and then summarizing or reflecting on what you have written, and then linking that back to the topic sentence, sort of to remind the reader where you came from. Okay, so I think I am going to demonstrate in my Word document here. So I'm going to refer to the short story that we've covered in our tutorials, I Will Not Apologize by Maeve Fisher, and I'm going to make up a topic here. So let's say the topic or the question is to discuss the conflict or the main conflict in the short story, I Will Not Apologize. So let's say that is our task here, discuss the main conflict in I Will Not Apologize. Okay, so as a student, let's say this is how I'm going to answer the question. So I've read the short story several times, and my feeling is that the conflict, or the main conflict in the short story at least, is between the character and the first person narrator, Bonita, and her grandmother. So now I'm going to say that in a sentence. That's going to become my topic sentence. So I could say the main conflict in Maeve Fisher's I Will Not Apologize occurs between the narrator, Bonita, and her grandmother. So what is this topic sentence telling me? Its sort of main idea and keywords are main conflict, and we've got the character Bonita and her grandmother. Okay, so these are three specific things that the reader will then expect to find discussed in this paragraph that I'm busy writing. So I could say something like, this conflict is evident early on in the story when Bonita states, and now I'm going to quote. So you can see I have introduced the quote by saying this conflict is evident early on in the story when Bonita states, and now I'm going to find the quote in here. I've highlighted it for myself. Gran doesn't like Mom, and she doesn't try to hide it either. So let me just double check this against the original text. So Mom is actually capitalized. I didn't do that, so make sure that you do. Make sure that when you're quoting, it looks exactly as it does in the text. And when you are quoting, remember to include an in-text reference. So an in-text reference shows that you know where it comes from. It also, if the reader of your paragraph wants to find the quote, then they know exactly where to look. So we know that the author of the story is Fisher, and the year of publication, we can double check that. Just take note, this is on page 60. Year of publication is 2006. So we provide the author surname, the year of publication, colon, and 60, because that is the page number. So I've said that this conflict is evident early on in the story when Bonita states Gran doesn't like Mom and she doesn't try to hide it either. And then I can elaborate. So what do I mean by this quote. Why did I include this quote? How does this quote link to conflict, or the main conflict in the short story? So if we read the short story, we know that Bonita's grandmother ends up calling Bonita, and she basically really lays into her about how she conducts her social life. So Bonita's friends with boys, and her grandmother takes issue with that because she thinks Bonita has reached a point in her life, perhaps puberty, and she thinks that she shouldn't be hanging out with boys because they might get the wrong idea. And we see that emerge or unfold in the short story, in particular when Bonita's grandmother speaks to her, or just speaks at her. It's not a conversation. She's basically having a little tirade, and Bonita just has to listen. So I could then elaborate on that. It's evident early on in the story when Gran doesn't like mom. She doesn't try to hide it either. And I could say something like, this indicates that Bonita's grandmother takes issue with the way Bonita's mother is raising her, or the decisions that she makes in raising her, and so on. And then I would provide an example to show that. So perhaps quote from Bonita's grandmother speaking at Bonita, telling her that she shouldn't be hanging out with boys, and so on. Any example that provides more evidence, you're welcome to do that. So with the Peel method, as I said, it's point, evidence, explain, and link. And it's fine if you provide evidence, explain, evidence, explain, evidence, explain, and then your Peel method will have a lot of E's. So it will be P, E, 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 however many L. That's absolutely fine. Just make sure that whenever you provide evidence for something, you explain. You can also swap it around. You can provide a bit of an explanation and then evidence. Just make sure that you show the link, show the relationship between these ideas, between the evidence, between the explanation, and between the topic sentence. Okay, and then perhaps as my summarizing sentence, I might say something like, these instances show that Bonita's grandmother has very different ideas to her daughter-in-law in terms of how Bonita lives her life, or in terms of how Bonita is raised. And which causes tension or conflict between the characters, and particularly Bonita and her grandmother. Because they can't or they don't relate to each other. So I'm not going to say can't, I'm going to say cannot relate to each other. So that's generally an academic writing convention. We don't use abbreviations, or we don't shorten words. So instead of can't or don't, we write cannot, do not. We don't write won't, we write will not. I think in some places this is falling away, this practice, but just to be safe, write out the full word. Okay, so as I said to you, the Peel method: point, evidence, explain, link. So you can see there are definitely 4 things here, which should indicate to you that your paragraph should be at minimum 4 sentences. So your topic sentence, evidence, your explanation, and then your linking sentence, which summarizes and brings everything together. As I said as well, you can provide evidence and explain as many times as you want within a paragraph. Just again, remember the limits that you've been given here in this question: 10 and 15 lines. Okay, so in the previous section, you were told between 100 and 200 words. That's for section A. For section B, they're not counting words, they're rather looking at lines, so between 10 and 15 lines. Okay. And then you're told to pay careful attention to the following instructions. Write a paragraph in response to the questions where you have been asked to provide quotations and you do not, marks will be deducted. So always provide quotes if you're asked. All quotations should be referenced correctly. 1 mark will be deducted for failure to comply. So I've shown you how to do that correctly. So you include the author's surname and then the year of publication, followed by the page number upon which the quote appears, or the section that you're paraphrasing. Another example, let's say you use the author's surname as part of the sentence. You could say something like, in Fisher's story, and then because I've used Fisher in the sentence. I don't need to repeat it in brackets. I can then just put the year of publication and then the page number that I'm going to be referring to. So in Fisher's story, the protagonist, who is also the narrator, struggles to get along with her grandmother, for example. Okay, so that would be another paragraph dealing with something else, but that's just an example of how you can also incorporate quotes. All right, so let's go through the questions. Man Lands on the Moon sometimes uses first person narration. How does first person narration contribute to the story's meaning? In your discussion, quote at least 2 instances where first person narration has been used to support your argument. So, again, we're talking about first person narrators. How does the first person narration contribute to the story's meaning specifically? So, what is the meaning of the story? And how does the fact that it's written in the first person contribute to this meaning? And then you're given more advice. In your discussion, quote at least 2 instances where the first person narration has been used to support your argument. So don't just quote any 2 instances where the first person narration is used. Quote 2 instances that you feel support the meaning of the story or really contribute to the meaning of the story. Okay, and take note that's for 7 marks, that question. So remember your paragraph structure and remember all of these tips that you're given here, as well as the instructions above here. So to write a paragraph, to incorporate quotes, and to reference your quotes correctly. Question 2. The central conflict in the story stems from the contrasting beliefs held by Makulu and her mother. Discuss this conflict and explain how it is resolved. Quote 3 instances from the text to support your discussion. So we're looking at central conflict. What is the main conflict in the story? So we're given a clue. It stems from the contrasting beliefs held by Makulu and her mother. So contrasting beliefs, if you need to look up the definition of contrasting, please do. And you're looking at 2 specific characters, Makulu and her mother. Then you're asked to discuss this conflict and explain how it is resolved. So in discussing the conflict, you've got to show that you understand what the conflict is about. So give a summary of what the conflict is about, as well as how it is resolved. So you can look that up if you don't know what resolved means. And then quote 3 instances from the text to support your discussion. So remember, for both of these questions, 1 and 2, when you quote instances, you're not simply providing quotes and that's it. You've got to engage with the quote. You've got to introduce the quote. You've got to explain the quote, as I showed you in my examples here. So this conflict is evident early on in the story when Bonita states, and then I provide the quote. So in doing that, I introduce the quote. I'm not just letting the quote stand there all alone, okay? And then I spend time explaining what I mean by that quote, or what is meant by the quote in the short story, and how it relates to the question that you've been asked. So how those particular quotes support your discussion. Then question 3, discuss how the setting of Man Lands on the Moon impacts the events in the story. You will need to identify the setting first before explaining how it influences events in the story. Remember to quote from the text to support your answer. So the focus is setting. So you're given good advice. Identify the setting first and then explain how it influences events in the story. So how does the setting influence events? Again, you can look up the word influences if you're not sure what that means, and remember to quote from the text to support your answer. So again, if you're following the Peel method to construct your paragraph, you will provide evidence and then you will explain the evidence. So in providing evidence, that's where you incorporate a quote into a sentence. Question 4, explain the significance of the title in relation to the short story. In your discussion, explain why you think the author chose the title, then provide a title that you think could be used as an alternative. So the focus is the title in relation to the short story. So what is the title telling you about the short story? Explain why you think the author chose the title. So you have to know the short story well or understand it well to sit there and think, why did the author do this? Why did they make this decision? And if you could rename the story, what would you call it? So that's the alternative title. And perhaps explain a little, why do you think your title is a good alternative? Again, remember, 7 marks. So all of these questions in section B are for 7 marks. So definitely let that guide you in your answering. In your study guide, you are introduced to a characterization table. So have a look at that characterization table. Using any 3 prompts from that table, discuss the characterization of one character from the short story. Your answer must include the prompt questions, responses to the prompts, as well as evidence from the short story to support the responses. So there's quite a lot going on in this question. So if you go to pages 46 to 47 in TL 501, you will see that table for characterizing, or a characterization table that allows you to break down the elements of a specific character in a story based on questions. So you're asked to use any 3 prompts from that table. So there are a lot of prompts. You just pick 3 of them and make sure you make it evident in your answer which 3 prompts you have chosen. So the reader and the marker are not going to know what you've chosen unless you tell them. So include the prompt questions and your response to the prompt, as well as evidence from the short story to support the responses. But remember, you're writing a paragraph.